Welcome to NOAA Live. My name is Grace Simpkins. This is our first webinar in the series. While you are home, we are offering this series on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays at 11 a.m. for the next few weeks. This series is brought to you by the NOAA Regional Coordinator in the Northeast so that you can get a peek at what our NOAA scientists do in all the various NOAA offices. Now, NOAA stands for the National Oceanic. I'll be talking about some things that we do with the Fisheries Service, and atmospheric. You'll be hearing, if you tune in later, next week, I think, from someone in the Weather Service Administration. So NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Now, as I said before, my name is Grace Simpkins, and I'm an educator and marine outreach specialist for NOAA's Woods Hole Sea Grant, located at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, as well as the NOAA's Northeast Fisheries Science Center. And I'll be speaking to you today about marine mammals in our backyard. Now, due to some technical difficulties this morning, we are re-recording this webinar. So I will answer some of the questions that we heard this morning from folks. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to show you where we're from. I know I just told you, but I'd like to show you on a map where Woods Hole is, just in case you've never been there. So let me share my screen with you. So as you can see, there is a map here of the United States, and Massachusetts is right here in this little box. Now, Woods Hole is located in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, so I've put a star where we're located. Now, this first screen shows you Sea Grant's symbol or logo, sorry. And again, we're at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, so I have a picture of our big vessels. We're known for our oceanographic research. I also work and do outreach for the Northeast Fisheries Science Center just down the street, still in Woods Hole, so I put a picture of that up as well so that you know where I'm from. And the Coast Oceans and Stewardship Program is one that I usually take into classrooms. So this is my first time going virtual and online. I hope you enjoy it. All right, we are talking about marine mammals today. And so since we're talking about marine mammals, I think it's important for us to know what a mammal is first. So I thought we would start by thinking about what all mammals have in common that make them different from other animals. So for example, a mammal is me or you or the other humans that you live with. Maybe at your house you have a dog. That dog's a mammal. Maybe at your house you have a cat. That cat is a mammal as well. Maybe you live on a farm and you have a cow. That cow is also a mammal. And if you're really lucky, maybe you live near a giraffe. That giraffe is a mammal as well. What do all those mammals have in common? What makes them different from a bird or different from an amphibian like this frog or different from this insect, this ladybird beetle? What do all those mammals that I showed you first have in common that those other animals don't have in common? Think about it. I'll give you a hint. That's right. All mammals have hair or fur. This is some wolf fur that I'm going to put around just to remind you, all mammals have hair or fur. Now you might say, wait a second, we're talking about marine mammals, and I know a whale is a marine mammal. They don't have hair or fur. And I'm here to tell you that they do have a few hairs on their nose region. All right, so all mammals have hair or fur. What else do all mammals have in common? Want another hint? Take a deep breath. That's right, all mammals have lungs. Now I'm going to use this snorkel to represent lungs because since we're talking about marine mammals that live in the ocean, I just want to remind you, since they have lungs, they have to go to the surface to breathe. So if we go underwater and I'm snorkeling, I need to be connected to the air because I'm designed to get oxygen from the air. I have lungs. Fish have gills. They're designed to get oxygen from the water. We do not have gills, so we have to get our oxygen from the air, just like marine mammals need to go to the surface. Now, instead of putting their nose out like we do, they do put their nose, but in whales we call it a blowhole. So they might be putting their blowhole up and taking a breath that way. All right, so all mammals have hair or fur. All mammals have lungs. Also, all mammals are warm-blooded. If you're warm-blooded, that means your inside temperature is the same no matter what's happening outside. If you're on a hot beach or you're really cold, your inside temperature is usually around 98.6 if you're a human. That's why if you're sick, the adult you live with might take your temperature, because if your temperature is different or higher, that might suggest that you're sick or your immune system is fighting something off. So usually our temperature is pretty constant. All right, hair, fur, lungs, warm-blooded, and all mammals have live young. So instead of laying eggs, mammals have miniatures of themselves. This seal has a pup, your dog has puppies, your cat has kittens, whales have calves, so they have miniatures of themselves. Now you might say, wait a second, I have heard of this strange animal called the platypus that I know is a mammal and it lays eggs. There are a few exceptions to the rule, the platypus, the spiny anteater, but for the most part, our mammals all have live young and do not lay eggs like the platypus. So all mammals, hair or fur, warm-blooded, lungs, live young, and last but not least, our female mammals produce, with their mammary glands, some food for their young. They produce milk. Now I have for you here some milk in this jar. This is cow milk, right? We said cow is a mammal, and they produce this for their young. And the really cool thing is whale milk is a little bit different. So I couldn't bring whale milk. That would have been very cool. But whale milk is more of the consistency of cottage cheese. It's thicker. So I have some cottage cheese here in a glass to compare to the milk. Now whale milk is fattier, right? So it's not as thin as this cow milk. And again, it's thicker. Now there are two reasons. One, those whales want their calves to get as big and as fat as fast as they can, right? So they have a lot of fat packed into that. But also, if you're a baleen whale, and we'll figure out what baleen is in a second, they can't latch on. So the milk ends up going into the water and then they can gulp it down. So let's see what happens when we pour this cow milk. And this is an experiment you can do at home. If we pour this cow milk into the water, watch what happens here. I'm gonna make sure that you can see it. Look at that. Our water gets a little bit white, but look, all of the milk has just sort of spread out and dissipated into the water. It's all really well mixed in. So if you were trying to get that as a calf, you'd be drinking a lot of water. It'd be sort of very, very watery milk. Now let's see what happens. I'm going to take a spoonful of this cottage cheese, right? So this represents our whale milk, and I'm going to see what happens when I drop this into water. Look at that. It still kept its shape and consistency even when I dropped it in the water. So if you were a whale calf, you could grab it and swallow it down. It has not mixed in with all the water. So kind of interesting to think about cow milk and whale milk being different in that way. Now I told you that all mammals have mammary glands that help them to nurse their young. So I thought I would also show you a picture. So again, I'm going to share my screen with you because last fall I was able to go to Alaska and see some fur seals nursing. And I thought that was a nice picture to show you that we have baby fur seals nursing from their moms. And here you can even see on this slide where, whoops, you can even see where the baby would attach to get the milk. So female mammals, they produce milk for their young through their mammary glands. All right, so that's what all mammals have in common. However, we're not here to talk about any old mammals. We are here to talk about marine mammals, and I wanted to share with you the 5 big groups of marine mammals. Now here in Massachusetts on Cape Cod, we really only have 2 of the groups, so I'm going to start with them, but I'm going to share with you all 5 because wherever you live, you can do some research after this webinar and look up what mammals are in your area and see what groups you have. So even though I'm going to focus on those first 2 because that's what we have, I'm going to cover all of them. And it's kind of fun not only to figure out what kind of marine mammals you have, but you might want to figure out what type of mammals you have. In your house, you could sort your stuffed animals into mammals and amphibians and reptiles and birds. Or you could go outside in your yard and look for different animals and see if you can figure out if they are a mammal or not. I'm going to pause here because I did have a few questions this morning. So normally I would pause and take some questions from the audience. So let's do that. Let's see what some of our questions were. Is my dog a mammal? Now, I already answered this, so you might remember, but let's go through our checklist. Does my dog, so I have a black lab, Lizzie. Does Lizzie have hair or fur? She does. She has black fur. Does Lizzie have lungs or gills? She has lungs. If Lizzie were to have babies, would they be puppies or would they be eggs? She would have puppies. So you know what? I'm pretty convinced that Lizzie, my dog, is a mammal. So any animal, if you want to figure out if they're a mammal or not, you can go through those steps to figure out if they're a mammal or not. Okay, let's see. Do we have another question here? Some other folks were asking, well, they asked which mammals lay eggs, and we already talked about that as well. The platypus and the spiny anteater lay eggs. All right, so let's talk about marine mammals. So marine mammals, there are 5 big groups, like I said. So the first ones we're going to talk about are the cetaceans. So our cetaceans are our whales, dolphins, and porpoises. When we talk about cetaceans, we're talking about all 3 of those groups, but I'm going to split them up into 2 different groups. Instead of talking about whales, dolphins, and porpoises, we're going to talk about whales with baleen, and we're going to talk about cetaceans with teeth. So cetaceans with baleen, we call those mysticetes. And cetaceans with teeth, we call them odontocetes. So that's how we're going to divide up our cetacean group. So first, let's take a look at our baleen, because baleen is really interesting. So baleen would hang down from the roof of the animal's mouth, and I'm going to show you some baleen. You might be wondering what that is behind me, and it just so happens, surprisingly, I have some baleen to show you. Now, our baleen whales like to eat tiny, small things. They might be eating zooplankton. This is a jar of copepods and a few worms that you might be able to see in there. So there are some copepods and worms. Now, I know that you might have a hard time figuring out what those copepods look like. So I'm going to share my screen with you again, and I'm going to show you what a copepod looks like. So you can see there are some copepods and there are some krill. Those are called zooplankton. Plankton is an animal that floats along with the current and can't swim against the current. So they're kind of drifters. If you're a zooplankton, you're an animal that's drifting, and if you're phytoplankton, you're a plant that's drifting. Now, some of our baleen whales are also eating small fish, so you'll see there I put some sand lance, capelin, and herring on that slide as well, because those are all things that are whales. Different, depends on what species, but different baleen whales might be eating. All right, so we have all this food that's sort of floating around in the water. But if you think about it, if I were to use my teeth, it'd be really hard to catch it with my teeth. So they have something different that's like a net in their mouth. It acts like a sieve, similar to what you would use for your pasta. To separate your pasta from the water, they want to separate their food from the salt water. So if I am a baleen whale, I have some baleen here from a fin whale. The baleen is attached to my upper jaw like this. It's attached to my upper jaw, and I am swimming around looking for food. This is what the outside of the baleen looks like. I'm going to give you a sneak peek. This is what the inside of the baleen looks like. It looks a lot like hair, doesn't it? This is made from protein called keratin, similar to your hair and your fingernails. This edge feels a lot like my fingernails, and the hair feels a lot like horsehair. If I'm swimming around as a fin whale, I take big gulps of water, and then my throat is full of water, but I don't want to drink that water. I just want the animals. So I use my big tongue, and I push the water through all those gaps in the baleen, and all of the animals get trapped on the hair, and I lick them off with my tongue, and I swallow them. Let's put my baleen back. There we go. I'm going to put it down like this for safety. So again, they are using their baleen like a sieve or a net to trap all the tiny plankton or perhaps small fish so that they can then eat it. If you have baleen, you don't have teeth. If you have teeth, you don't have baleen. So mysticete has baleen. Odontocetes have some teeth. So I brought some teeth to show you as well. Since I just showed you a dolphin, let's start with some dolphin teeth. Here are some dolphin teeth. You might be thinking, they're really small. Well, dolphins are eating fish. They don't have to be super large. Here's a dolphin skull, so you can see. So you can see right along the edge here, those little holes are where the teeth would be mounted, right? They have a lower jaw. I just don't have enough hands for that. So this is called their beak or their rostrum. And so that is where their teeth would be, and they would be capturing their food. Now, since we have the skull, it's kind of fun to look at. You can also see the animal's blowhole or their nose right there. If you look at the back of the skull, you can see where that dolphin's brain was. So these are one of our odontocetes, and this is what its tooth looks like. Now, I also have for you another type of tooth that I think is really, really interesting. This tooth, can you guess? Can you guess what whale it's from? It's from a sperm whale. You might have read the book Moby Dick. If you have, that's a sperm whale. You can see where the gum line is on that tooth. Now look, a couple of things to notice. Very similar shape, even though they're a different size. Now that tells you that this animal is eating different sized food, right? So a sperm whale likes to go for giant squid. Our dolphin is eating fish, but a very similar shape because this is a tooth for eating other animals, right? This is a ripping and a tearing tooth. Now here's a really cool thing about sperm whales. Believe it or not, most of them only have teeth along their lower jaw. And in fact, some sperm whales have been found that don't have teeth at all, but they're still healthy. They're still able to capture giant squid. So that's a very interesting field of study, I think, looking at what sperm whales eat and where their teeth are located. So sperm whale teeth, dolphin teeth, those are our odontocetes. I'm going to return our teeth to the back right here. All right. Now, one of the questions that I got earlier that I think we could answer right now, somebody said to me, what's the difference between a dolphin and a porpoise? Because I just showed you a dolphin. I did not show you any porpoise teeth. I don't really have any. But the difference between a dolphin and a porpoise, remember when I said that the dolphin has that long beak or rostrum? Well, a porpoise, it's shorter. Porpoise's teeth look a little bit different. They're more spade-like versus being that cone shape that we saw in the dolphin. And if you look at the dolphin's dorsal fin, the dolphin tends to have a rounded one versus a porpoise tends to have a more triangular one. So dolphins and porpoises, both odontocetes. They both are toothed whales. All right, so those are our cetaceans. We tend to have many cetaceans here. We have humpback whales. We have minke whales. We have North Atlantic right whales, fin whales. We have harbor porpoises, and we have a variety of dolphin species. Now, the second group I want to talk about, we also have on Cape Cod. You might see them on the beach. They are, do you know what it is? That's right, it's the pinnipeds. So our pinnipeds are our seals, sea lions, and our walrus. So I don't have a sea lion with me, but that first seal that I showed you before is an example of that type of seal. These are true seals. They don't have any ear flaps. They have no flap around their ear, but our sea lions and our fur seals do have an ear flap. So if you remember from that picture of that pinniped that was nursing, you would have seen a little ear flap right there. So our pinnipeds, locally we have harbor seals and we have gray seals. So today to show you, this is really, really cool. I brought a gray seal skull. So this is from one of our local seal species. This is its nose, which I always think is interesting to look at. You can look at their teeth. Again, look at the cone shape on that tooth. That is a ripping and a tearing tooth. They are eating other animals. They are carnivores. And if you look in the back, again, you can see where the brain would be. So this is one of our pinnipeds that we would have. Now, one of the folks this morning asked, why do you sometimes see these animals up on the beach? Well, these animals, if you see them on the beach, it could be completely normal and they could be completely healthy. They pull out on the beach to dry out, to warm up. They'll leave their pups there. In fact, if you see a pup, and you think that something is wrong, you should call the stranding network. If you look it up online, you can find the Marine Mammal Stranding Network, and there's volunteers up and down the coast that will come out and take a look or monitor. Because a lot of times a female seal will leave her pup on the beach and go out and gather food. So sometimes if you just leave that pup alone, her mom will come back, his or her mom will come back, and then they will be completely fine. Hard for us to know because we're not the experts. That's why we call the stranding network. So if you live in Alaska, you might have a lot of other pinniped species that we don't have. You might have fur seals, you might have ring seals, you might have walrus. So wherever you live, I would take a look and see what pinnipeds you have. You might have a variety of species that we don't have. It just happens that our local ones tend to be gray and harbor seals. Occasionally we get other visitors as well, but they're our most common. All right, so far we've talked about pinnipeds and we've talked about cetaceans. There are 3 other groups. Think about it, because you might know them. If you live in Florida, I'll bet you've seen this one. Have you seen a manatee or a sirenian? So manatees and dugongs are sirenians. They like warm water, so this is not their natural habitat. Here in Cape Cod, we don't typically see them, although we have had one occasionally swim through the Cape Cod Canal, but it's very off track. We hope that it heads back down south because this is not its ideal habitat. So we have the sirenians. We have, let's see, we have the sea otters. I don't have a sea otter to show you, unfortunately. Sea otters are not on our coast. You might see them if you live in Alaska, and you might also see them if you live in California, but we do not have sea otters here. And the 5th group, I should have a little one. I don't have a big one. It's so little, I may have misplaced it, but he's under my chair. The last but not least, the polar bear is the last group of marine mammals. So just to show you and remind you, our 5 groups of marine mammals are our cetaceans, our whales, dolphins, and porpoises, or odontocetes and mysticetes, the sea otters, our sirenians. Oh my goodness, what's happening? And oopsie. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing because my mouse is going crazy. All right, I'm not gonna share. My mouse is going crazy. I think I spilled a little milk on my mouse pad. So for right now, you'll stick with me. So we have our cetaceans, we have our sea otters, we have our sirenians, our manatees and dugongs, we have our polar bears, and we have our pinnipeds. Those are our 5 big groups. All right, should we try this one more time? Let's see if we can try this one more time and I can share my screen with you and you can see those groups. Okay, and there we are. So those are the 5 groups. Now, just to show you a few of the species that we have locally, just as a reminder, I told you we only have cetaceans and pinnipeds. So these are some of our local species. Now, like I said before, I think a research project for you, if you live somewhere else, is to look up the species that you have and maybe pick the one that you're most interested in and see if you can learn something about them that you didn't learn today. I think I had a question that somebody asked me. Oh, yes. Somebody asked me when we got to this point about whales. I'm going to show you on this whale. They asked me, how does the whale tail move? So I'm here to show you that a whale tail goes like this, up and down. I'll show you from the side, up and down. If you're a fish, their tail goes side to side, okay? So if they're a fish, their tail is going side to side. So if you see an animal and you look at how their tail is going, that is a good indication of whether they're a marine mammal or a fish as well. All right. Let's see. I have a few more things to show you because I think you may notice behind me there are some other bones that you can take a look at. So one of the interesting things is when we have to go out and do surveys and figure out what species we're looking at, we might be looking for certain characteristics to help us figure out what species we're looking at. So what do we look for when we're looking at these different species? We are looking at whether they have teeth or baleen, right? We already decided what that is. We're looking at what color the whale is. We're also looking at the size, and that's where the bones behind me come into play. The ones that are too big for me to hold up here, so I have them behind me. Some of our whales are really large, and that helps us to figure out what they are. So I'm going to show you some of the bones that are behind me that are really, really large. I'm going to tilt this up just like this. You might see that bone that's hanging on the wall, and you might ask yourself, what is that bone? Let me give you a hint. This is the size of the one you would find in a human. Let me hold it up there. I'm going to put it up against some blue paper so it sticks out. So this bone is the human one, and the one on the wall is from a sperm whale, and that is a rib bone. That gives you an idea of how much larger this whale is than humans. And for comparison, I have a rib from a dolphin. So we have a dolphin rib, we have a human rib, and we have a sperm whale rib. They look very similar, but they're different in size. So some of these whales are quite large. I also have a vertebrae from a sperm whale. So this vertebrae is very similar to the vertebrae you have in your back. Here's where the spinal cord would go, right? But it is much larger. So some of these animals are really, really large. And the really cool thing is that some of these big whales, they migrate over long distances and they're not eating along the way. So their size, they put on all of that fat so that they can make these migrations and they can fast along the way because they come up here to our area often to feed. There's a lot of food here, but then they like to go down south to have their calves where it's warm. So they might go all the way down to Florida or beyond to have their calves. So they have to have enough fat that when they're traveling where there's very little food, they can afford to live off all of the fat that they've stored. So being big is really important. All right, now, in addition to studying these animals and counting these animals, which is super important, so we know how many are out there, in an effort to keep their populations healthy, we look at the things that might be threats to these marine mammals. Different things that might be threats to their health: pollution, right? Entanglement if they tend to get caught up in gear, ship strike if they tend to get hit by ships, and climate change if the food that they like to eat is maybe a species like Copepods that really likes cold water. Then as the water temperature changes, then where their food is might change, and that might affect the health or where the distribution of where we might find those animals. So we look at all of these things. As scientists, we might go out and put out equipment. This is something that is going to be put out to record sound so we can listen to marine mammals. We have here some scientists that are listening on a ship. In fact, Genevieve Davis will be talking about marine mammal sound a week from Friday. Super cool. I encourage you all to listen in. She'll play some really cool sounds. So that is, I'm going to just give you the date because you might not be watching this live. That's going to be on April 3rd. You might be interested in part of our hearing about our aerial surveys. This is someone taking a couple of pictures from an airplane. Allison Henry is going to be talking about how we study whales from the sky, and she's going to be talking on Wednesday. That's March 25th, if you want to hear about how we study whales from the sky. And also, sometimes our scientists go out on small boats to take a look at these whales. Now you might say to yourself, whoopsie, what can I do? How can I help to keep these marine mammals healthy? A couple of different things. I'm going to share with you one more slide. These are ways to think about lessening your impact, right? We as humans have impacts, so how can we lessen that? Well, you can participate in cleanup efforts. Maybe the ocean or the beach is being cleaned up, or maybe you live in a town that's close to the ocean, and so you clean up the woods in your area because you know that that trash might wash into the ocean. Or maybe you just make sure you're very diligent about recycling. Recycling at your house, recycling at your school, maybe buying eco-friendly products like recycled materials, or using something that uses a little less energy. And most importantly, you can make informed decisions, right? You can do the research. I've been encouraging you to research different pieces of information. So if you're asked to make a decision, just do some research and make an informed decision. When you're buying food at the market, you can make sure that you're buying sustainably managed, meaning seafood that is being caught in such a way it will be around for generations to come. You can use fishwatch.gov to figure out which seafood is sustainably harvested. You can be involved in your student council. You can spread the word of what you learned today. These are all things that you can do to make a difference. Now I'm going to do a few more questions that I got from folks, and then it will be time for me to say goodbye. All right, so let's see. A couple of questions that I got. I'm going to go back to my picture of me. Here I am. A couple of pictures. All right, so let's see. One of the questions. Are otters pinnipeds? They are not. Sea otters are their own group. Pinnipeds, sea otters. I know they look a little similar, but they are not the same group. All right, let's see. Another question. Are all whales endangered? Excellent question. Not all whales are endangered. All whales are protected under the Marine Mammal Protection Act that was put into place in the 70s. So we are not allowed to harass or hurt marine mammals, but they are not all endangered. To be endangered, that means that you're in danger of going extinct. That means that there aren't many left. So we take a look, the management side takes a look to figure out if something should be on the endangered species list or not. Some marine mammals fall under the Endangered Species Act, and they are endangered. Some are threatened, and some are healthy populations. So if you're really interested in a certain type of marine mammal, I encourage you to look that up. If you go to the National Marine Fisheries Service website, you can look up any species and figure out if they're endangered, threatened, or healthy. So take a look if there's one that interests you. One I will tell you about, the North Atlantic right whale, and again, if you listen to Miss Allison Henry when she does her talk, she's going to talk a lot about the research we do. They are endangered. There are about 400 left in the world. So we spend a lot of time studying them, trying to get their population back to a healthy size. Another question. Where did I get my bones? Great question. People always ask me where I got my bones because I just told you marine mammals are protected under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. So we are not allowed to own bones like that. I don't own them as Grace, but NOAA has permits. So I have them through permits with NOAA so that we can use them for education. So these animals were not harmed by us. They were already dead. Maybe they were old, maybe they were sick, maybe something ate them and they washed up on shore. So when something washes up on shore, a marine mammal, we take as many samples as we can to figure out how healthy the animal was or to figure out what happened to the animal. So we might take blood, we might take skin, all sorts of things. So when they take samples like that, we also have permits so we can take them for education, because the more you know, the better the decisions you can make, right? So I can do things like this and share that information with you. So no animals were harmed in getting these bones. All right, one more question, or two more questions, I guess. We talked about how big these animals are, but I have some ropes. Usually I do this when I go into the classroom. I just talked to you about the North Atlantic right whale. This rope is the length of a North Atlantic right whale. How many kindergartners long do you think this rope is? Make a guess in your head. The North Atlantic right whale is 12 kindergartners long. Well, depending on what time of year, but on average, 12 kindergartners long. Now, the largest living animal on the planet is, oh my goodness, there's so much rope I can't even. The blue whale. Guess how many kindergartners long the blue whale is? The blue whale is about 24 kindergartners long. So a blue whale can be up to 100 feet long. North Atlantic right whales, 45 to 55 feet. So this is twice as long. That's a lot of kindergartners. They can be quite big. All right, last but not least, someone asked me, what's the most interesting place you've ever studied marine mammals? So I did my graduate work. That means I went to college and then I went on to school after college in Alaska. And I think one of the most interesting places that I did some research was on a volcano. We wanted to see what the seals were doing on this volcano. They would haul out on the beach, coming up on the beach, and we wanted to see, did the tide affect when they hauled out on the beach? What were they doing on the beach? We wanted to get 365 days of footage with what they were doing, and we didn't want to put someone out on that volcano all year long. So we were setting up cameras and clearing trails. But every morning we had to get up, pull out the satellite phone, and call the volcano hotline to make sure the volcano was not active. Luckily, it was not active the whole time we were there. We did have a helicopter ready to come grab us because we had to be dropped off by helicopter. But several years later, it did become active. So I was glad we got to do our research and everything was smooth and we did not have any volcanic eruptions while we were there. All right, I'm trying to think if I've forgotten anything. If I have, if I did not answer all of your marine mammal questions, then I encourage you to do some research on your own and see if you can find the answer to those questions. I, again, work for Woods Hole Sea Grant. If you go to the Woods Hole Sea Grant website, you can find my name, Grace Simpkins. You can always send me an email. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. But again, you have the power at your fingertips to find all of this information as well. So I encourage you to look around and find out some more. I'm so glad that you sat in on this webinar. I hope that you come and see our other NOAA Live webinars to hear more about the really interesting careers and interesting research that we do at NOAA, because NOAA is a fun place to work. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I will see you later.